Hej och välkomna, väldigt roligt att så många har hittat hit till vårt webbinar tillsammans med Digicert och Dean Cochlin som är Senior Director Business Development på Digicert. Dean kommer i sin dragning här bland annat gå igenom skillnaden mellan olika certifikatstyper, VMC och många andra delar. Om ni har några andra frågor under webbinariet så kan ni ställa dem i chatten så kommer vi svara på dem efter Deans dragning. Welcome Dean, we are so glad to have you here. The stage are yours.
Thank you and good dag everyone. Thank you very much for having me at this webinar today. We're going to talk a little bit about digital certificates, verified mark certificates and site seals and a bunch of other interesting topics which I hope will help you learn some more information about how certificates can help strengthen and increase trust for your brand. So you already heard the introduction about who I am. I'll skip that and take you right to the agenda. So what we're going to do is look a little bit about SSL or now as they're known TLS certificates. I'll talk a little bit about the different types of certificates, why automation is important for these certificates. Extended validation certificates have been a topic that have been around for a long time, but the way they're shown in browsers has recently changed. And then I'll give you some statistics on the overall market for SSL to show you how that market has changed over time. In addition to that, we'll talk about how you can build trust using these certificates as well as new types of site seals. Site seals have been around for a long time, but they've changed now, and so you're going to see some exciting new developments in site seals. As I mentioned, we'll talk about verified mark certificates, a new type of certificate that allows you to see your logo in your customer's email box. And then we'll finish up with a Q&A session. So save your questions to the end. I think you can type them in the chat and we will address them when we get to the end of the presentation. So let's kick things off. A quick reminder about the role of SSL. What does SSL do? Well, primarily it provides encryption between your computer and the server. And it also provides authentication of the website that you're connecting to. If you're a consumer and you're connecting to a website, you want to make sure that the website you're connecting to is exactly who you believe it is. And so having validation of that website is extremely important as you go around the internet. So it does inspire some assurance of safety and security because you want to make sure the data that you're sending, whether it be a password or a credit card, be encrypted to the recipient. And you want to have some trust that the person that you are encrypting to is the person who you think you're encrypting to. So browsers have now required SSL and site certificates for quite a while now. They're showing negative indicators for sites that don't have SSL. For example, in Chrome, you'll see the words not secure next to sites that don't have HTTPS. In Firefox, you'll see a red lock with a line through that lock to show that sites don't have HTTPS. So when you encounter sites like that, that might raise questions in your mind is why does this say not secure? What am I doing here? Am I at the right site? And so this is actually pushing the adoption of SSL to more and more sites every day. And you're going to see some statistics later to show how the adoption of SSL has proceeded over the years. So let's take a look at the different types of certificates. And this is kind of a helpful analogy when we look at the three types, which are DV, domain validation, OV, organizational validation, and then EV, or extended validation. For domain, for domain validation, this is similar to, well, the analogy here in the United States is a library card. A library card is something you can walk into a library and get with very little identification. Librarian will say, what is your name? Where do you live? We'll write that down and hand you the library card. So there's really no validation there. And it's the same with organization validation. In organization validation, all they're doing is checking to see that you own that domain name, www.example.com. With organization validation, more validation is done, similar to what you do when you apply for a driver's license. They check some basic information about you, verify your address, and then issue you the driver's license. And then for extended validation, much more thorough validation is done, similar to when you get a passport, where you have to present various forms of identification and present yourself in person and things like that. So these are sort of the analogies, and the brands that you see below are from the DigiCert family of brands that we offer in each of these categories. Let's look at this a little deeper. This is a nice slide because this gives your customers a picture of what they're seeing when you use different types of certificates. If you're a website owner and you use a DV certificate, on the left-hand side you see that customers really have no idea who you are. All they know is that they're connected to your domain name, and that's it. With OV, they get a much clearer picture. They start to get a clearer picture because information has been validated about that site. And then with EV, they have extremely a clear picture here of who it is they're validating to, because all of this information about the site is presented in the certificate and is validated. And shortly, we're going to show you how you see that information in a certificate. And this goes into a little bit more detail about what we authenticate when we issue these types of certificates. As I said, with DV, we just validate that you have control of that domain, and this can be issued in just a few minutes. With OV, we do everything we do in DV, plus we authenticate the organization through a government database. And these organization details are put into the certificate. Typically, this is issued in a few hours. And then with EV, we do all of that, plus we do much more detailed validation of the organization, and put in there things like their address and their location in the certificate. And of course, because this takes a little bit longer to do, these take about a day or two to be issued. And again, the brands are below these pictures here. So when would you use these different types of certificates? Well, I think it's fairly obvious, but for domain validation, these allow you to comply with browsers so you don't get a red X through the lock or the words not secure. And these are probably best for informational pages or someplace where you just need encryption and authentication is not that important. Especially for price-sensitive customers, these could be an ideal solution for those, as long as they're not transmitting sensitive type of information. For OV, when you are parsing sensitive information and passing that along, because your customers want to make sure that it really is you, this is more appropriate. And for extended validation, we recommend this for e-commerce or online banking, where identification of the website is front and center, and I'll show you how that's done in a moment. So what's driving this need for automation? You may have heard that automation is something that needs to be done for certificates. And primarily this is being driven by the browsers and the reduced lifetime of certificates. You may remember that not that long ago, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, you can get a certificate that had a 5-year validity. And even more recently, you can get a certificate that was valid for 3 years. Then that lifetime has been reduced to 2 years, and now the max is 1 year. But we are seeing indications that browsers are saying they would like to reduce that even further, maybe 9 months, 6 months, and then eventually 3 months. So if that's the case, and we get to that type of situation, there's no way that server owners will be able to manage certificates using spreadsheets, for example, or using Outlook reminders. They're going to have some type of automation in place so that certificate management can be done automatically. So browsers are pushing for shorter validity periods. Compliance, this is something that's looked at all the time. They look for misissuance of certificates. The public is scrutinizing logs of certificates that are out there, and therefore agility is a much greater requirement. And so these best practices that we had in the past are not, and that were common, are not considered the same as today's best practices. So we have to automate in order to ensure that your website does not have downtime as certificate lifetimes continue to decrease. This is going to become very, very important and very prominent as we see going forward. So I told you earlier that I was going to show you how you can recognize sites with extended validation. This used to be a lot easier. Browsers had special indicators without having to click on anything to show you right away that you were at a site with extended validation. It might have been a green URL, a green lock, or a full green address bar. Those visuals have gone away, and now you have to make one click to see where, if the site is using EV. And I've written a complete blog below on that link. If you go to digicert.com/blog and just look up extended validation, you'll see it there. But to do this in Chrome, you're going to go to a site, and this is a website I selected called peoples.com. And when you click on that lock, you get this drop-down box. And if you notice in this drop-down box, you'll see it says certificate valid, and it's issued to People's United Bank National Association, US. No other website certificate other than EV gets this treatment. For any other certificate like an OV or a DV, all you will see is certificate valid. That's it. You will not see the name of the website. So if you use Chrome, go ahead and try this. Go to a site that has extended validation like digicert.com. Click on that lock, and you'll see that type of information. And you will not see it on any other website that doesn't have EV. If we look at this in Firefox, same thing. We click on that lock, and we get this drop-down window, and we see, again, certificate issued to People's United Bank National Association. Again, if you were not at a site that had EV, all you would see is connection secure. And if you want more information in Firefox, you can click on that right arrow, and this window pops up that gives you even more information, the location of this bank and who issued the certificate. So there's a lot of good information here. Clicking by one click on the lock that you will see for EV certificates. This is the same as in Safari and other browsers. All right, the next few slides talk about the SSL market and what type of certificates we're seeing out there and what the total population is. Now, these statistics were as of the end of June. I have some new numbers as of this morning, as the end of August, which I'll layer onto this. But at the end of June, Netcraft, which is a company that browses the entire web and gets certificate statistics, they're located in England, and they do a marvelous job of getting details about website certificates out there. They saw 95 million certificates at the end of June. Now, as I mentioned, I got some new numbers this morning. It's now at 100 million. So it's gone up by about 5 million in the last couple months. Now, in June, this was up about 1.6 million from the previous month. And DigiCert had about 1.2 million new certificates since February of this year. And DigiCert has about almost 22 million active certs, where our nearest competitor of commercial certificates had about 15 million. So let's take a look at the overall market and market share. Well, when you look at all the certificates that are out there, who's issuing the most certificates? It's probably not a big surprise that Let's Encrypt, a provider of free domain validated only certificates, has most of the market with a little over 50%. At the bottom of the screen, you see that 95.4 million number that you saw on the prior screen. And then in terms of issuing commercial certificates, DigiCert is the leader here. And when I say commercial certificates, I'm talking about paid certificates. Sectigo is next with about 16%. And then everyone else lumped together, whether you're talking Entrust, GoDaddy, GlobalSign, everybody else makes up 7% of the total market. And then how does this break down by type of certificate? Again, probably not a big surprise that most of the certificates being issued today are DV, given that Let's Encrypt is giving them out for free. But then OV is roughly about 20% of the market. And then EV is a fairly small amount of certificates of the total market at 0.2%. Now you might say, well, that's really small. EV must be going away. Well, you'd actually be wrong with that assumption, because if you were to look at the sites that are doing e-commerce and just e-commerce sites, that would show that more than a third of e-commerce sites are using EV. So it's actually very interesting that for a specific application, EV is quite large in that particular application. So let's look at certificates over time. For the first part of the last decade, the certificate volumes were fairly steady. As you can see, there were, I don't know, around 3 to 5 million certificates out there. And then suddenly in 2017, things started jumping up, and then started really jumping in 2018, 2019, and then a huge jump in 2020. Why is that, or why was that? Primarily because browsers started changing how they viewed certificates, and sites that did not have certificates. As I mentioned earlier, browsers started implementing things like the red lock with the line through it, or the words "not secure" on non-HTTPS sites. Now we're hearing that browsers are going to make even more in-your-face type changes, where you might get an interstitial page that comes up and says, "The following website is not secure. Do you want to proceed?" And people might look at that and say, I'm not sure. Do I really want to move forward with that, or do I just move away from this website? So those type of indicators are going to make it more critical that websites use HTTPS. Now in 2021, we're actually up to 100 right now. So the number has grown about 12 million from last year, and we're about halfway, well, more than halfway through the year. We're not going to see the kind of growth, I don't think, between 2019 and 2020, but we are continuing to see growth, not just because more of the web is becoming encrypted, but more and more sites are going online, in not just in the regular part of the world, but also in emerging markets. More and more sites are going online in Brazil, in China, in South Korea. So we're going to continue to see growth in those particular areas. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second, and we're going to transition to a new topic about smart seals. So let me show you a short video. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to ask that our host share the video that we're about to play.
And taking forever to log into your clunky web browser are finally over. But some artifacts of the World Wide Web haven't kept up with the times. We're talking about SSL site seals. Those icons found on the checkout pages of nearly every major e-commerce site and bank to help usher in trust on the internet. Dating back to 2004, the same year flip phones were all the rage, site seals were a passive sticker. But over time, people abused these static images by copying and pasting them without the proper security behind them. But as the web got smarter and more capable, the old seals didn't evolve. Well, it's 2021, and it's time site seals got an upgrade. Actually, a complete overhaul. The new DigiCert Smart Seal works harder for customers and site owners because it's dynamic, with animation that makes it difficult to copy, spoof, or steal. It also displays rollover data that gives customers quick information about the companies they're interacting with. And for the first time ever, brands can showcase their verified logo inside the Smart Seal, just like brands do in verified emails, and just like social media platforms do for verified users, and now even cell phone carriers do for verified callers, all as added measures of identity validation. It's proactive security, so you can convert more transactions on your site. It's smarter for you, it's smarter for your customers. It's the new DigiCert Smart Seal.
Switch back to my screen. And hopefully you're seeing my screen again. So you just got a little taste of what this new Smart Seal is. And hopefully you understand that this is much different than seals that you've seen in the past, which had been static images, didn't really change. You just kind of threw it on your website like a sticker. But people could copy that, paste it, put it on their website, and therefore it wasn't really valid. In April, we introduced this next generation site seal that's available with all of our Secure Site and Secure Site Pro certificates. And it's dynamic. So when you hover over it, if you were to hover over the image at the bottom left, you would get this little pop-up on the bottom right that shows some information about who the certificate was issued to, the certificate holder, that you do have encryption, it's valid. And if you were to click on the little arrow to the right, you would get even more detail about the certificate. This makes it very difficult to copy, to spoof, or to steal. And it makes it very easy for your customers to know that your site has been validated. And it provides interaction for your customers so that they can actually interact with your website and with the security of your website. A much bigger improvement than what we've had in the past. As I mentioned, if you were to click on that full background check, you get a pop-up window that shows you this information on the right, much more detail than is typically available. And it actually brings that certificate information forward to you or to your customer so that they can see all the information about your site. And this is really helpful, I think, to help. Again, we talked about encrypting, and then we talked about authenticating. Who are we encrypting to? Well, here it is right here. This tells you exactly who you're encrypting to and all the information about that site. Extremely helpful, and it also shows your company logo. So again, if your logo is something that's familiar to your users, or if you want to get brand impressions, this is a great way to do it going forward. So why would people use the Smart Seal? I think we've identified some of those things, but studies show that if you have things that people like to interact with, like Site Seal, this will actually help increase your website conversions. And this gives that trusted authentication that's now been missing from browsers, without clicking a few times. This is right up front and in your customer's face so that they can validate who they're dealing with. It's interactive and it's engaging. It's something that customers haven't seen before. And they are curious as to what happens when they click on it or roll over it. And it helps boost your brand credibility. Who is it that you are? Put it out there so your customers can see it. And this helps increase user confidence that they are dealing with the right website and the right company that they expect to be dealing with. So we do have some resources to help. The video that you just saw is up on Vimeo, as well as another video on Trustmarks, and we'll have this available to you at the end of this presentation. So let's transition now to my final topic, which is verified mark certificates. This is a fairly new development. They only started being issued in July of this year, although pilot has been going on for more than a year with Gmail. And what these do, it allows your customer's inbox to actually show your logo next to the from name in the inbox. So as you can see in this screenshot on mobile, on the left-hand side, what used to happen is you would just see initials, and now with verified mark certificates, you actually see the full company logo. You see this on mobile when it's in the list view, as you see here, but also when you click on the email, that logo is also shown next to the from name. So what does this allow? Well, this allows your marketing team to get millions of brand impressions in front of your customers for free, basically. I mean, after you buy the VMC once a year, you can now send as many emails as you want to anybody you want, and everyone who uses a Gmail account will see these logos. So Gmail is the first to implement VMCs out of the box. I mean, there are other smaller email providers, but Gmail, being the largest email provider on the planet, allows deliverability to all of those customers. Now, in order to get a VMC, you need what's called DMARC. And DMARC provides security benefits, which we're going to go through in the next few slides. So let's take a look at some of the details behind VMCs. So VMCs are based on a protocol called BIMI, Brand Indicators for Message Identification. There's more information about this group, the standards body, at bimigroup.org. And with BIMI, you can now deliver these authenticated logos to the customer's inbox and help drive those brand impressions and increase email engagement rates. There was one study done by Verizon where engagement rates and open rates increased by 10%. These are some of the people that are using BIMI today. And out of these, Google and Fastmail are using VMCs. So as I said, in order to get BIMI, you need DMARC. DMARC stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. When you have DMARC enabled and set to quarantine or reject, you are eligible for a VMC. What does this do? This blocks people from pretending to be you. If we had an email address of ceo@portsgroup.com, if the organization did not have DMARC, someone else, excuse me, could send an email using that email address. But with DMARC enforced, they can't do that. So there's security benefits to using VMCs because you have to have DMARC enforced. And in order to have DMARC, you need these two other technologies called SPF and DKIM. I'm not going to go through the details of that right now, but some of that information is on this slide. So there is a tool, there are many tools out there to be able to check your DMARC record and to check your BIMI record. I've noted one on the bottom of this page from BIMI Group, but there are other ones from companies like Mail Hardener, Valimail, a lot of other companies out there that provide this type of information. So again, I'm not going to go through this because I just mentioned it, but DMARC does give you security benefits, and it also gives you details on who might be trying to send from your domain name. And of course, with the logos, you get the brand viewability and brand protection and deliverability improvements in your email with DMARC and VMCs. So what do you need to get a VMC? Well, we talked about the DMARC, and in order to get DMARC, you need SPF and DKIM. Your organization has to be validated to what's called the EV level or extended validation, just like we saw with EV-SSL. The domain has to be compliant with a technology called CAA, or Certificate Authority Authorization. This is not true yet, but it will be going into effect later this year. So all this does is says that you specify in your DNS record who can issue a certificate on your behalf. In other words, you might have a CAA record that says, I only want to get certificates from DigiCert. So you specify that in your record. If somebody in your company went to go to another provider to get a certificate, that provider has to look at the record and determine whether or not they can issue. And if they see DigiCert, they might come back to you, they will come back to you and say, we can't issue because your record only shows DigiCert. Your organization will have to create a valid BIMI record. A BIMI record is just a DNS record that shows that will have your logo and your VMC. And a restriction here is that you must have a trademarked logo, and that trademark has to be registered in one of these 8 jurisdictions that you see in number 6 here. Now that is probably going to change in the future, so it's very likely that Sweden will be added to this list in the next I would say 4 to 6 months, or maybe sooner. But right now, these are the trademark countries that are allowed. There's another step that's not on here, and that step is that you have to meet in person with a notary. We send a notary to your location to meet with you, to validate your identity before we issue that certificate. So why would you want a VMC? Well, as I mentioned, it does help with email engagement, improving open rates. It does provide greater security through DMARC. It gives you those free brand impressions, which your marketing department really likes. They like to get your brand out there so people notice it, they recognize it, and they can interact with that email easier. Helps your company stand out from all the emails that come in every day to customers' inboxes, and it helps deliver an authentic experience. In other words, meaning that it really is you, and it shows that to your customer. So let's summarize what we talked about. We're coming to the end of the presentation. So we want to make sure that you show your customers that you are serious about security and identity. And so we have various tools that will help prove that. We talked about the extended validation SSL or TLS certificate and the benefits there. We talked about the dynamic site seal, the new site seal that gives your customers the ability to roll over it and click on it and show more information about your site. And lastly, we talked about verified mark certificates. Another weapon in your inbox, or excuse me, another weapon in your toolbox to help verify your identity and to help show your customers that you're serious about security and identity. And so that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing, and I think we're going to go to a little Q&A moderated by our host. So thank you very much for your attention today, and let's see what kind of questions you have.
Hi, Dean. Yeah, we got a couple of questions that I think you're the best person to answer for us. The first question is, it seems that I can get an SSL certificate for free these days. Why would I pay for one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as you saw in my presentation, Let's Encrypt, which is offering free SSL certificates, has a lot of the market share. What I will tell you is this. So I use an analogy when I answer this question to antivirus software, because right now we have a lot of antivirus software providers that provide free antivirus. So why would I pay for antivirus? Why would I go to a Norton or a Avast or some of these other companies that provide paid antivirus software? And the answer is very, very straightforward. If you're an individual that wants to use free antivirus software, that's fine, as long as you know that if you have a problem, you're not likely to get immediate help. For a company that needs to maintain their computers online or needs to maintain their uptime on their computers, having a free provider is probably not going to work for them, because if there's a problem, there's a update to the antivirus database and your computer downloads an update and suddenly your computer freezes, it won't restart, who are you going to call? With free providers, there's nobody that you can call. You might have to sit and wait on chat, wait online. It's the same with free certificate providers. They're not providing live help. There's only a skeleton staff that everything is automated. And so when you have an issue, it's going to be a big problem. So if there's a downtime with the certificate authority, maybe not providing certificate responses, and it's causing your website to go offline, this could be catastrophic for an online business. So going to a paid provider for either antivirus or for certificates provides your business with assurance and the ability to get a hold of someone when or if there is a problem. And so I think this is a very big distinction that companies should be aware of should there be a problem. And that's why you don't see companies using free antivirus solutions, nor should they be using free solutions for certificates, because of the support that's provided with paid providers.
Great. Great. I actually got two questions about VMCs. The first one, is there any rumors about adoption from the bigger vendors like Microsoft to introduce the VMCs into their platforms?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now, as I mentioned, Gmail and Fastmail are the two that are providing VMCs or showing VMCs today. We expect Verizon with the AOL accounts to do that in the near future. And I think everyone else is looking at this. As I said, this just started in July. And so other providers are looking to see what is going on. Are people using it? How's the adoption? Are people engaging with these VMCs? So I think everyone is kind of looking at it right now. Yesterday, I just saw that another provider, actually in Sweden, is looking at adding this to their portfolio. So it's still early days. I can't say with definitive statement that, yeah, Microsoft is going to do it. I don't have that information. I can't say that Apple's going to do it. I don't have that information. And as you know, these companies don't really provide a lot of visibility into their future plans. But I think it's pretty evident that they are looking at this, watching it, and hopefully we can expect some changes in the future. I'll have to, hopefully I can do this webinar again next year and we can provide you with more details then.
Another question about VMCs. What about if you distribute your marketing related emails via marketing automation platforms like Pardot or MailChimp or whatever? How is it going to work with VMCs?
Yeah, so VMCs should work regardless of how they're being distributed, because it's the recipient's mailbox that checks for the VMC. So what happens here in Gmail, if Gmail gets a marketing email from your systems, and you have a BIMI record in your DNS, Gmail checks that BIMI record to see if there's a VMC there. And if there's a VMC, they will pull the logo and display it. So the sending platform is really not relevant here.
That's good. Another question about the EV certificate. Do you know if it's going to be some visual changes to the browsers like it was before when they showed up the company name in the browser, or is it going to be hidden even in the future?
Yeah, I say it would be unlikely that browsers are going to go back to the way they had it before. I know the EU has been pressing browsers to supply this information. And so I think the compromise is they're providing it with that one click that I showed you. I doubt that they're going to go back to the way it was before, but I've been proven wrong in the past, so I don't know. I think that the way they've got it now with the one click is probably the way it's going to stay for a while.
Yeah, that was all of the questions we got. So thank you, everyone.
I do see one other question here about, do I need an EV cert to apply for VMC? And the answer to that is no. When you're applying for a VMC, it doesn't matter whether you have a website or not, or any type of certificate on your website. What I said in the presentation, and maybe was causing some confusion, is that to obtain a VMC, your organization will be vetted or validated to the same standards as extended validation. So when you apply for the VMC, we will do an in-depth validation of you as a person working for the company and your organization to verify that it is really the organization that you say it is. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this, and thank you very much, Dean, for an excellent presentation. If you have any further questions, you can contact us at Porch Group, and have a nice day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.